At New Year's dinner, my father-in-law threw wine in my face. I froze, stunned. Everyone stared, and my husband didn't even flinch. Stick with me, because this night would change everything. I had spent hours preparing for the Caldwell family New Year's dinner. The apartment smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread, candles flickering on the table. I wanted tonight to be perfect, a moment where Derek and I could show I wasn't just his wife, but part of the family. But the second I stepped into the living room, Walter's eyes narrowed like I was some intruder. Everything started small, snide comments about my cooking, jokes about my city ways. But I brushed them off, thinking family banter could be harsh. Then, in front of all our guests, Walter leaned close and said something cutting about me not being good enough for his son. I laughed nervously, hoping Derek would step in. He didn't. Margaret, his wife, cleared her throat awkwardly, trying to change the subject, but the tension only grew. Then it happened. Walter grabbed my glass of red wine, leaned toward me, and flung it across my face. The liquid soaked my dress, my hair, and my pride. Everyone froze. I could hear Derek shifting in his seat, but no words came out. I wanted to disappear. My cheeks burned, my hands trembled, and all I could do was retreat to the bedroom, shut the door, and let the stinging humiliation sink in. Sitting there, dripping in wine and shock, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. A calm, unfamiliar voice spoke. "I know what happened tonight. I can help you make things right." My heart raced, part curiosity, part fear. Could this be a chance to finally take back some control? Could someone outside this toxic family help me? I didn't know what was coming next, but for the first time since walking into that apartment, I felt a spark of hope. The night I was humiliated might just become the night everything started to change. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my hands still damp from the wine Walter had thrown at me. The apartment was quiet now, the laughter and chatter from the dinner long gone, but the sting of humiliation lingered. Every detail played over and over in my mind. The way he had smirked, the guests' shocked faces, Derek's frozen expression. I felt small, invisible, and furious all at once. Memories from the past few months surfaced. The small comments, the harmless jokes Walter had made about my cooking, my city upbringing, my career ambitions. At first, I had laughed them off, hoping Derek would notice or intervene. But tonight made it clear, he never would. Every slight, every jab, every cold glance added up, and now the wine on my dress was more than just a mess. It was proof of everything I had endured. My phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. It was Sophie. I answered, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, worry clear in her tone. I smiled weakly, saying, "I'm fine, really." But she knew me too well to be fooled. We talked quietly for a while, Sophie comforting me, letting me vent without judgment. I downplayed the incident, but I couldn't hide the fire simmering inside me. My hands clenched around the phone, a strange mix of anger and determination rising. After we hung up, I sank back onto the bed and let my mind work. Derek had been useless, always so passive when it came to his father. I realized something bitter but necessary. If I wanted things to change, I couldn't rely on anyone in that family. I needed a plan, a way to make Walter face consequences without relying on Derek. Then I remembered the phone call from the previous night, the mysterious voice offering a way to make things right. My pulse quickened. They had hinted at secrets, hidden truths that could topple Walter if used carefully. It felt like a lifeline, a chance to turn the humiliation I had suffered into power. Quietly, methodically, I began to think about my next steps. I would not let Walter's arrogance go unchallenged. I would be smart, patient, and precise. The rage that had burned silently all these years was now sharp and clear. I didn't just want revenge, I wanted justice, and this time, I would make sure it was my hands that delivered it. The night of humiliation had ended, but a new game was beginning, and I intended to win. After the humiliation at New Year's, I realized I couldn't react blindly. I needed to understand Walter, to know his weaknesses before making any move. I started paying close attention to the Caldwell household, watching his habits, his routines, the way he treated everyone. Every word he said, every gesture he made, I memorized. I noticed the way he checked his phone obsessively after lunch, how he avoided talking about certain business matters, and the small grudges he carried against old friends and colleagues. I kept up the polite, submissive act in front of the family. I smiled, nodded, and laughed at his jokes, all while noting every detail that could be useful. Derek thought I was still shaken, still the wrong daughter-in-law, but inside, I was sharpening my mind. Each glance Walter gave, each command he barked at Margaret or the staff, I recorded silently in my memory. He had weaknesses, and I was determined to find them. Then there was the money. Over quiet conversations with Margaret and casual observations during dinners, I started piecing together the hidden side of Walter's finances. There were small signs, an envelope that never made it to the mailbox, murmured phone calls when he thought no one was listening, strange documents on his desk. He had secrets, financial dealings that he didn't want anyone to know about. And those secrets could be leverage if I played my cards right. It was during one of these quiet days that I met Daniel Harper. He was an outsider, someone Walter barely acknowledged, but Daniel had knowledge I couldn't ignore. He spoke in low, careful tones about business loopholes and vulnerabilities, about mistakes Walter had made in the past. I realized that with his help, I could start turning information into power. We became cautious allies, our interactions discreet, always under the guise of casual friendship. All the while, I maintained my facade, polite, hurt, and slightly shaken in front of the Caldwells. No one suspected that behind my quiet demeanor, I was collecting pieces of a puzzle that could unravel Walter's carefully constructed world. Each discovery, each whispered secret, was a step closer to leveling the field. Every night, I went to bed with plans forming, strategies running through my mind. Walter had humiliated me, underestimated me, and assumed I was powerless. But I was far from powerless. I was preparing, watching, learning, and soon, everything would change. I realized that information alone wouldn't be enough. I had to use it carefully. The first step was Derek. I started planting small doubts about his father in casual conversations. I asked him questions like, "Did you notice how Dad reacted when that deal fell through?" Or, "Have you ever wondered why he never told us about that loan?" I kept my tone light, curious, almost innocent. But inside I was testing the waters, seeing if Derek could question Walter's actions. He was hesitant, unsure, but the seed of doubt had been planted. With Walter, I changed my approach. I smiled politely, laughed at his jokes, and nodded as if I was still the submissive daughter-in-law. But when we talked, I carefully guided conversations so his arrogance and hypocrisy came through on their own. I'd comment on a news article or mention a minor business decision, and he would reveal more than he realized. Every brag, every casual insult, every boastful story added pieces to the puzzle I was building. I learned to listen closely, to catch every slip, and to file it away in my mind. Margaret, meanwhile, began to confide small secrets. At first, it was little things, how Walter always pressured her about money, the arguments they had behind closed doors. But slowly, she revealed more. I didn't push. I just listened and nodded, offering sympathy and concern. Each detail gave me more leverage, more understanding of the cracks in their perfect family image. Every night, I wrote down everything. The insults, the subtle humiliations, the betrayals, and the arrogant lies Walter had told. I kept a notebook hidden in my apartment, a record of all the ways he had tried to control and belittle me. It wasn't just for revenge, it was proof, a strategy in progress. As I built this quiet arsenal of knowledge and observation, I felt my confidence grow. I was no longer the embarrassed, powerless daughter-in-law from New Year's night. I was patient, calculating, and ready to play their game, but on my terms. Each step I took, every careful word I said, strengthened my position. Walter's arrogance, Derek's hesitation, Margaret's secrets, they were all pieces I could use. The slow-building power I felt was intoxicating, and for the first time in months, I could imagine turning the humiliation into control. I knew the moment of reckoning was coming, and when it did, I would be prepared. I knew the time had come to make the first move. I had gathered all the information I needed, and with Daniel's help, I could start turning it into action. We planned carefully, making sure nothing looked like it came from me. I began leaking small, believable financial mistakes to Walter's business associates. Minor errors, missing numbers, subtle mismanagement that could easily be explained away if anyone asked too closely. At first, the effects were slow. Daniel reported back that Walter was reacting nervously, checking documents repeatedly, calling meetings that never happened, and asking questions that had no clear answers. He didn't know who was behind it, and that uncertainty made him cautious, even a little panicked. Watching him scramble, even from a distance, gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. Finally, he was feeling just a fraction of the stress he had caused me. Derek, as usual, remained unaware. He went about his day, charming and distracted, completely missing the tension building around his father. Margaret, however, started to notice subtle changes. The way Walter muttered under his breath, the anxious glances, the small arguments with colleagues. It was enough to make her uneasy. She came to me one evening, pretending to ask for advice, and I listened quietly, letting her voice betray her concern. She didn't suspect my role, but the tension between her husband and the world around him grew, and I felt a faint thrill watching it unfold. Even as I took satisfaction, I couldn't ignore the guilt that bubbled up. Part of me worried I was crossing a line, becoming someone I didn't want to be. But the humiliation, the disrespect, the way Walter had made me feel powerless, pushed me forward. I reminded myself that I wasn't acting out of cruelty. I was seeking justice, balance, and a way to reclaim control over my life. Each evening, I reviewed the effects, taking notes, adjusting the plan, and preparing the next step. Every small mistake I leaked, every whispered rumor, every sign of Walter's growing paranoia added to the momentum. I was careful, patient, and strategic, knowing that one wrong move could ruin everything. The first strike had shattered the calm Walter took for granted, and I felt the weight of both power and responsibility pressing on me. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. Walter had started noticing small changes, and I could feel his suspicion creeping closer. He looked at me differently now, sharper, more questioning. Every word I said, every smile I forced, seemed to be analyzed. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen, his eyes cold. "Emma," he said slowly, "do you know anything about those mistakes?" My heart skipped, and for a moment I froze. But I forced a calm smile and shook my head. "Mistakes? I have no idea what you mean," I said softly. He narrowed his eyes but didn't press further, and I breathed a quiet sigh of relief as he left the room. That close call taught me how careful I needed to be. I started planning even smaller, subtler moves. I pretended to fumble with documents, accidentally leave papers on the table, and casually mention minor business news that would distract him. Each tactic was calculated to mislead Walter without drawing attention to myself. He grew more frustrated by the day, snapping at Margaret or muttering to himself, and yet he still had no proof. Every encounter was a test, a chance to outsmart him, and I made sure I never gave him an opening. Derek, meanwhile, started noticing the changes in me, though he misread them completely. He saw my quiet confidence and assumed I was just recovering from the New Year's humiliation, that I had finally grown comfortable in his family. He complimented me on being more assertive, without realizing how carefully I was moving behind the scenes. I smiled politely at his comments, hiding the tension and the strategy brewing under the surface. Even at home, the suspense was heavy. Every interaction with Walter felt like walking on a tightrope. If I slipped, if I said the wrong thing, everything I had built could come crashing down. I found myself double-checking every detail, watching his reactions and adjusting my plans. The thrill of near discovery mixed with fear, keeping me alert and sharp. I also started documenting his behavior more carefully, noting every hint of aggression, every suspicious glance, and every mistake he made. This record was not just for strategy, it was insurance. Walter's suspicion was dangerous, but it also showed me that my moves were effective. Each day, I grew more skilled at staying one step ahead, learning to turn his aggression and doubt into my advantage. The danger was real, but so was my determination to see this through. The day came when Walter thought he could humiliate me again, and I knew it. He invited me to a business gathering full of colleagues and partners, expecting me to shrink, to apologize, to stay quiet as he mocked me. I wore a calm smile, my hands steady, my heart pounding with anticipation. He leaned close to whisper a cruel joke about my abilities, expecting me to react the same way I had months ago. But this time I was ready. I waited for the right moment, letting him speak, letting the room watch him flaunt his arrogance. Then, with careful precision, I revealed the evidence I had spent months gathering. Copies of contracts he had falsified, emails where he threatened partners, and proof of financial mismanagement. All laid out in a neat folder I handed to the key business associates present. The room went quiet. People who had respected him began to murmur, flipping through the papers, their faces showing disbelief. Walter's face went pale. He opened his mouth to explain, to deny, but the words faltered. Derek, standing beside me, froze, stunned by my confidence and the clarity of the proof. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, horrified at the scene unfolding. I watched as his reputation, built over decades, began to crumble in real time, brick by brick. The power he thought he had over me, over everyone, slipped through his fingers in minutes. The satisfaction I felt was immense, but it was not just about revenge. It was about justice. Every insult, every slight, every moment of humiliation he had inflicted on me over the years now had weight. And now everyone could see the truth. I felt a strange mixture of triumph and relief, my chest light with the knowledge that he could no longer dominate the room or me. Walter stumbled through excuses, trying to save face, but the damage was done. I had played my part perfectly, keeping my composure, letting his arrogance and past mistakes speak for themselves. Derek's eyes met mine, a mix of shock and admiration there, and Margaret looked like she couldn't believe what had just happened. For the first time, I felt fully in control. The humiliation I had endured, the endless quiet rage, the careful planning, it all led to this moment. Walter's downfall wasn't just professional, it was personal. I had finally gained the upper hand, and the sense of justice washing over me was sweeter than I had imagined. For the first time, I smiled not out of fear or politeness, but out of power and clarity. I knew it was time to confront Walter directly. No more subtle moves, no more waiting in the shadows. I arranged to meet him in his office, a place where he always felt powerful and untouchable. As I stepped in, he looked up, a smug smile on his face, expecting me to apologize, to shrink, to look small. Instead, I stood tall, calm, and ready. I began by recounting the years of insults, dismissals, and humiliations. I spoke clearly, each word measured, pointing out the moments he had belittled me, the subtle jabs he had made at my career, my intelligence, and my worth. I listed his manipulations, his arrogance, and the times he had tried to control everyone around him. He tried to interrupt, to deny, to charm his way out, but I stayed focused, my voice steady, my eyes locked on his. I used everything I had learned, every scrap of knowledge, every secret, every piece of evidence. I spoke with intelligence, weaving in the proof I had gathered over months. Emails, documents, eyewitness accounts. Everything was presented calmly, convincingly, and without anger. I let the weight of facts speak louder than my emotions, and it worked. Walter's confidence began to crack before my eyes. Derek had followed me into the office, unsure what was happening. He watched, stunned, as the man he had admired and feared was forced to face the truth. I could see the disbelief in his eyes, the realization that his father was not invincible. Margaret, who had been hovering in the background, looked horrified and anxious, sensing the intensity of what was unfolding. Throughout the confrontation, I remained composed. I smiled when necessary, used charm to keep the tension from spiraling, and kept my words sharp enough to land, but controlled enough to stay credible. Walter's arrogance, the very thing that had humiliated me for so long, was now crumbling. By the time I finished, he was silent, stunned, and powerless. I had exposed him completely, not just to Derek and Margaret, but to myself. I felt a surge of empowerment, a sense of justice, and the clarity that comes from finally standing up for yourself. For the first time, I didn't feel like the timid, overlooked daughter-in-law. I had transformed, and Walter's world had been shaken by my courage and strategy. The reckoning was complete, and the weight of years of betrayal finally lifted. After the confrontation, life in the Caldwell household changed completely. Walter was no longer the commanding, untouchable figure he had always been. Colleagues avoided him, business partners questioned his decisions, and the arrogance he had carried for years was replaced with uncertainty and fear. His isolation was complete. Even Margaret kept her distance, no longer blindly defending him, unsure of how to navigate the chaos. It was quiet revenge, subtle but powerful, and it unfolded right before everyone's eyes. Derek, for the first time, truly saw me. He had watched silently as I took control, confronted his father, and exposed years of manipulation and lies. There was admiration in his eyes, but it was mixed with guilt. He couldn't ignore the realization that he had done nothing to stop his father all these years, that he had allowed Walter to humiliate and undermine me repeatedly. I didn't need him to say it, his guilt was clear. I, too, felt a complex mix of emotions. The satisfaction of finally seeing justice done clashed with a deep awareness of the cost. Revenge had taken time, energy, and emotional weight. I had poured my intelligence, patience, and careful planning into this, and though it had worked, I couldn't deny the exhaustion that came with it. I had changed, grown stronger, but part of me carried the burden of every calculated step, every secret maneuver, every manipulation I had executed to get here. Sophie came over one evening, sensing my mix of triumph and fatigue. She listened as I recounted the months of planning and execution, nodding with understanding. You did what you had to do, she said softly. It's okay to feel both proud and tired. Her words reminded me that it was normal to feel conflicted, that even the most satisfying victories come with emotional costs. I realized I didn't need anyone else's approval to validate my actions. I had my own sense of justice, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the house settled into a new rhythm. Derek respected my boundaries, Walter kept to himself, and Margaret quietly reflected on her own role in the family dynamics. I had gained clarity and control, but I also knew that real change required more than just revenge. I had learned my limits, the cost of fighting, and the importance of standing up for myself. The illusions of power and control that had once dominated our family were shattered, and for the first time, I felt a bittersweet sense of closure. Life was not perfect, but I had reclaimed my strength, and that was enough. The next new year arrived, but this time it felt different. Instead of hosting a tense dinner or worrying about Walter's judgment, I spent the evening quietly with Sophie. We laughed, shared snacks, and reminisced about the past year. The city skyline sparkled outside the window, and I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. After everything, I was free from the fear and humiliation that had once controlled me. I felt lighter, more confident, and in control of my own life. Derek called later that evening, his voice hesitant. He wanted to reconcile, to fix whatever had gone wrong between us during the chaos with his father. I listened carefully, but I knew what I wanted. I told him calmly that while I cared for him, I wouldn't tolerate being sidelined or ignored again. I set clear boundaries, making sure he understood that respect and partnership were non-negotiable. He was silent for a moment, absorbing my words, and I could tell he finally grasped the weight of my strength. Meanwhile, Walter tried, in his own clumsy way, to regain control. He sent messages, attempted calls, and even tried to schedule meetings to assert his influence over Derek and me. But nothing worked. I had taken the power he once held over me, and now, even his arrogance couldn't break the calm I had built. Each attempt he made only reminded me of how far I had come. The fear that once gnawed at me was gone, replaced by quiet confidence. As the clock struck midnight, Sophie and I toasted with sparkling cider, celebrating not just the new year but the new chapter of my life. The emotional scars of the past months remained. They were reminders of what I had endured and the strength I had gained. I thought about Walter, Derek, and Margaret, and I realized that while revenge had succeeded, the real victory was my sense of self-respect and empowerment. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my story. I didn't need validation from anyone, and I didn't need to prove myself to my father-in-law or anyone else. I had faced humiliation, planned carefully, executed my strategy, and emerged stronger. The quiet victory wasn't about spectacle or revenge for its own sake. It was about reclaiming my life and my dignity. As fireworks lit up the night sky, I smiled genuinely, knowing that I had survived, I had grown, and I was finally free. This story shows the importance of setting boundaries, standing up for yourself, and handling family conflict wisely. Remember, you can seek justice without losing your integrity. If you face manipulation or abuse, document it, stay calm, and reach out to trusted friends or professionals for guidance and support.